pleasant good morning to all our listeners. It's 11:01 in studios. And about this time on Wednesdays, we have Leadership Plus. So welcome to another edition of Leadership Plus. And today Reverend John Lewis is in studio with us. Not too long he had returned from St. Vincent as he was part of the 13-member contingent that went to lend a helping hand to our brethren in St. Vincent. So he's here with us today. Good morning, Reverend, and how are you today?
Good morning. It's good to be back into our home. Thank you for allowing us to share even while we were in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. And so it's a real joy to be with you in person today at Hope FM.
Yes, could you give us an update on how things are in St. Vincent today?
Well, St. Vincent is in turmoil in some ways. The news has been spreading across the world, I'm sure. And of course, what is at the minds of everyone is the attack, as it were, on the Prime Minister.
Yes.
And so there's some upheaval. And so that has just added to the other crises that St. Vincent and the Grenadines is facing right now. Of course, the volcanic eruption, COVID, crime and violence, the hurricane, the storms, but we're seeing a reprieve. Many churches and other organizations are participating in so many ways to help restore and to recover the losses and damages done to the island of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
All right. Well, we thank you for that update. We're going to jump right into our discussion for today. And we're looking at the book called Everyone or Everybody Matters. Could you give a highlight, an update on what we're going to be discussing today?
Great. So this is another of our books that we are reviewing. Over the past several weeks, we have been doing several other books, but this one is called Everybody Matters, and the authors are Chapman and Sisodia. It's a 2015 edition of Everybody Matters.
Right.
And it is really a book about how leaders challenge the status quo and move away from things that have not worked, is not working, and to include everyone in the process. And so it's a book about the significance of every individual who are involved in your organization, in your church, in your company, in government, and to see the contribution and significance of everyone that is involved in your structures.
Yeah.
And it goes back to our home as well, that parents understand the significance of each child and how that is shared mutually, because with that comes along respect and appreciation and value for everybody involved in whatever we do across our phase or sphere of influence as well.
Okay. So the book first mentions that, taking everybody matters, the leadership style is to take a radical approach, to the task at hand. And that type of leadership is not only where the leadership takes a radical approach, but you put away practice that are maybe archaic.
Yes.
And take on new ways of doing things that may not have been proven to work. Is that a high risk? And how can a leader guarantee followers? Because we know people are not given to change. So how can a leader in that context guarantee followers or go towards the goal?
Well, as you know that leadership is costly.
Yeah.
And cowardice and leadership don't go hand in hand. It takes courage, it takes commitment, it takes tenacity, and all these virtues and values that enables a leader to to function efficiently and to have an effective team around him or her to accomplish the stated goals, the stated objectives that would accomplish the finished product in any company, organization, and within the church context as well.
Okay. So, what would you define success as according to the text?
Great. So it is where a team of people
Mm-hmm.
understand their function within the organization and fulfill it to the highest ability. We talked about the insights that we have an appreciation for the strengths that each person will bring to a company, organization, movement,
Mm-hmm.
and employ them in that particular field of their skills
Right.
and their giftings.
Mm-hmm.
And when that is done, and that takes time,
Right.
and sometimes we are impatient in
Mm-hmm.
filling a role or filling a position within a company, within even the church, within government. And so it is sometimes done arbitrarily
Right.
without serious evaluation, serious understanding of the person or persons
Mm-hmm.
you're bringing alongside you. And then that tends to have negative repercussions. And sometimes we deal with the fallout when we have to ask someone to leave, someone to step down or step aside. And that's perhaps the toughest part of the role of a good leader.
Right. So the leader must ensure that he understands his human personnel be totally informed of who he has in his company. So I think that there must be a value placed on employees, right? Because the book is text.
Yes.
Is everybody matters.
Yes, everybody is significant and everybody makes a contribution to the
Mm-hmm.
success. And so there has to be an affirmation
Mm-hmm.
of the value that each person brings to the company's organization, structures, movements, so that we all together fulfill the stated purpose for
Mhm.
which we started out. That's
Mhm.
why it's so important from the inception that everyone is on the same page, as we would say. Everyone understand
Mhm.
where we are heading to,
Right.
how we plan to get there. So there's always organizational management, organizational assessment along the way to ensure that we are on the right path. So if there is some indication that we are veering off, we can always go back to our blueprint.
Mhm.
And for us, in the biblical sense, that the best blueprint, of course, is God's Word.
Right.
The scriptures, where we find our starting point, our
Mhm.
ending point,
Mhm.
the journey to accomplish the goals and objectives that have been set for us as well.
Right. So the text mentioned that the leaders that take a radical approach and do things differently, and they function from their deepest sense of right, they can be termed as being analytical, because I read that they examine the way that business is run normally. Would you suggest that that is something that all leaders should continually do to see success in their companies, to examine where they are and where they want to go? Is that necessary for leaders to do?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And like we talked about, every good business would
Mm-hmm.
do stock taking
That's right.
and do an evaluation of their work,
Mm-hmm.
so that we understand whether we are making a profit or whether we are losing customers
Mm-hmm.
or losing business in whatever we do, whether it's in the church context, whether we're losing members.
Yeah.
Sometimes we are not keenly aware that people are slowly, gradually leaving our congregations.
That's right.
If we are not solidly grounded and observe what's happening within our church leadership, or even politically, if we are not aware that we are losing support,
Right.
as we would say in the political sense,
Mm-hmm.
and have a measurement to determine what we need to do and how we need to get back on track as well.
Yes. We have Richard Branson. He, is the brand manager.
Mhm.
So I believe the manager of the Virgin brand.
Yes.
And he has this statement that says, clients do not come first. employees come first. And I believe this is a bit different from what will have been taught before, in that the clients is important more than the employees of an organization. Do you believe that there should be more focus on members or employees of an organization, and do you think that will enhance the success of the company?
Yes, we talked about the primary customer.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people who are your stakeholders,
Right.
people who work for you, in that sense, the employees,
Mm-hmm.
and to understand the value that they bring to your organization.
Yes.
But then, of course, your secondary customers, those who support what you're doing in the business, who purchase, who buys from you,
Mm-hmm.
in the church, those who support the work and the call and the ministry in which you're involved, who give of the income that God provides for them.
Mm-hmm.
In the political realm, those who support your agenda and your political mindsets. And so we have to create a balance between your primary customer and your secondary customer
Mm-hmm.
in order to have a sense of a proper movement in where we're heading to. If there's a disconnect
Right.
and having not a great understanding of who our people are, we may tend to lose them.
Mm-hmm.
And you see, that's why even in the business world, people cut ties with organizations that have been established for long years
Mm-hmm.
and move on, or they set up their own business. We see that, unfortunately, within the church community as well. Splinterings, independence of churches and leaders, because sometimes we are not careful to do the hard work and do an assessment
Mm-hmm.
of what and where and why we are doing what we are doing.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we are inside of Leadership Plus with Reverend John Lewis, and we are also streaming on our Facebook and on YouTube. And if you have questions that you want to ask, you can send them in on 403-1031, or you can text them in on the chat on the requisite pages. We're going to go back at value, Reverend Lewis. We know that most companies and organizations determine a good year by only finance, and they deem that as growth. Could you highlight on what is true success in a company outside of the financial growth?
Good. So there is a concept in the leadership movement,
Mm-hmm.
and one is of people, planet, or profit. This is called the triple movement concept.
Right.
So some companies will focus on the people and understand the value. Some people have a deep interest in what's happening in the climate and all the changes that's taken place. But for most part, the bottom line is the dollar for businesses, companies, organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that becomes the dominating factor, that all we are concerned is the profit margins, and we neglect the people who help to make those profit, our business tend not to do very well. People tend to leave your company, they leave your organization, they may even leave your church, because they're not seeing that the companies, organization, movement, structures have a deep sense of appreciation for their value and for the contribution that they bring to their organization.
Okay, so there must be focus on your employees and who they are, because a lot of people walk away from companies and they probably have a back pain or a leg pain because probably enough focus wasn't given on their seating arrangements and these different things that will impact a human life, rather than just the focus on finances and probably a reputation amongst the business world. Yeah.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we tend to forget to, Abigail, is that
Mm-hmm.
business should include fun and excitement within their companies and organization, and perhaps the sense that we have to be driven and driving people incessantly without any sense for their own health and well-being as individuals.
Right.
And so there is no joy. But so if we're not careful, work can become a drudgery.
Yeah.
And so people just turn up, they do their work, they check in 8 o'clock, and by 3:45 they're checking out, because for them it's just a duty.
Yeah.
And so there's no passion about what they're doing. So it is going to be very important and significant for anyone in leadership to ensure that the heart of your company is on the people
Right.
and their needs
Yes.
before the bottom line. The interesting thing is that if that is taken place, the bottom line tends to be better,
Right.
because people outperform, they give sacrifice, they make time and adjustments to their schedule because they appreciate your value for them as individuals. So business is not all chores and hard work and demands made by leaders,
Right.
but it actually can include some fun times, expression of gifts and awards for your employees. Motivate your people, and we need to understand the human nature at that level. Everyone
Yes.
appreciate
Yes.
gifts and sentiments of appreciation. Just a sense of you're doing a great job. I appreciate your participation. I appreciate your contribution, and without your contribution or help to our organization, to our movement, to our church,
Right.
we would not be able to succeed
Right.
and do the job that we are seeking to do.
Right.
But there's some concepts in this book that we'd like to highlight.
Yes.
Is that some of the principles that they left for us is to principles of vision casting, success of a legacy of transformational leadership. And some of the pointers that they make for us is that purposeful preparation. A vision endures in part because of careful preparation. We have to invest the time for deep thinking, careful preparation
Right.
before we execute. And so that's the challenge, to take your team, to take your leadership team aside perhaps for a weekend and invest time and energy and effort and resources to think through what is the purpose of this company, what is the purpose of my church, my organization, my government, and determine where we want to go and what our objectives, what our goals. So purposeful preparation. We fail to plan. Apparently, the saying goes that we have planned to fail.
Yeah.
Actually, so there has to be that purposeful preparation in everything that we do, whether it's in the family background, in the family setting. Families can prepare for their homes, for the children, and the future of their family. Businesses can also project that. We have businesses that project 20 years out.
Yeah.
And sometimes for us it's short-sightedness, probably one day, one week, 1 month at a time. But great companies and great leaders think ahead and plan ahead. So that's one of the key issues that we have to commit to in terms of purposeful preparation. It is not something that is done arbitrarily,
Right.
but it's something that is strategic, something that is intentional, and something that we're committed to in spending the time to become involved with.
Yeah. So we agree that successful leadership and leaders, they are, they examine the business regularly, and that they understand that the greatest measure is the way that you touch lives. And in order to touch lives of all the people, the members, the customers, the vendors, and so forth, you must have purposeful preparation and a vision that includes them as well.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So as you mentioned, so there has to be a wide variety of participants.
You're right.
The vision is not crafted only by the leader, but by a team or senior leaders.
Right.
And so this calls for inclusion
Right.
of your leadership team. And we have to be aware that our team brings to us their years of experience, their skills, their education, in order to make such an input that will propel and cause us to catapult in the future. And so it is important that we include our leaders, our members who involve in management, so that they become part of the decision making.
Right.
That includes the different perspectives that they will bring from their backgrounds, and the potential that we have as a company, as an organization, to move our company, our church, our leadership programs fast forward, especially in these challenging times, uncertain times, of course, but times that we can invest in, times that we can take advantage of, in a sense, because of all the opportunities we have as leaders during the changing times.
Yes, because there is this statement that says, there's an old statement rather, that no man is an island.
Yes, absolutely.
And that, all our actions may have a rippling effect. Can you highlight on how actions really can affect, or negatively or positively affect, an organization?
Great. So, an organization, a company, a church, government is as strong as its weakest link.
Right.
And so we have to identify perhaps the weakness within our structures and help to bridge that and provide support and strength in the area of our weaknesses, so that we staff our weaknesses. So within our structures, we recognize, because of due diligence and organizational assessment, that this is a weak area in our company, within our church, within business. And you find the staff that can meet that particular need. So staffing and placing people is not just done arbitrarily. And that takes a mindset that we are not just trying to fill a vacuum, but we are seeking to make our weaknesses become stronger and to fill those gaps that are lacking. So if there are gaps, and every organization, every structure has gaps, and how do we find the right person to fill those gaps that will eliminate our weakest links in our companies and so on.
Right.
So people focus is another aspect. While most visions focus on products or services, or visions about the impact we have on yes. And so we identify the need for the people, and we talked about human capital not too long ago, and so that we incorporate all the value and the capital that they bring to us in order to accomplish our particular vision and mission for the company. So we have to focus on the people. Of course, there's room to focus on the other two areas that we raised. The planet, of course, that's a command in Scripture to take care of what God has given us and created for us, the universe. And so the mandate is to take care of the earth and all the changes that we're seeing. And just on nightly news, there is the concern for all the dramatic changes happening in the climate, in weather, in the fires, we see the melting of the snow and in different parts and flooding that man do not really have an answer to at this point. So, and then of course the bottom line. But also describe the ideal state. We focus not on who we think we are, but on who we want to be. So we're always in the stage of becoming, becoming a better person, becoming a better leader.
Yeah.
We encourage participants, all of our members, all of our team players, to think big. Actually, there's a book out there called Think Big,
Yeah.
that everyone should get a handle on, and so that we are not locked away in some small box, as it were. Think outside of the box is a popular slogan, and so we have to stretch the imagination. Someone said that the brain is like a muscle,
Yeah.
and it expands the more use we give to it. So that's why one of the questions we ask is, what book are you reading, or what program are you involved in terms for your own personal growth and personal development? And then we have to think through how we are going to achieve the vision and objective of our companies as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are discussing Everybody Matters here in Leadership Plus, another wonderful session of Leadership Plus with Reverend John Lewis. And we're talking about the value of customers. We're talking about leadership, where you take a radical approach and you do something different. And you always have to be analytical, looking at where you are as a person, looking at where you're heading as a business. And Reverend John is elaborating on that with us. Could you continue on the perspective view or the perspective focus?
Great. So, perspective really, it's really the key to a lot of what we do. We understand perspective when we were little children in terms of looking out at the ocean, and we think that that's the end of the world, where the cloud or the seem to touch the ocean, and that's a perspective that little children would have until you branch out and you fly and you travel on the ocean, realize there's a great big world out there. Sometimes you wonder what's behind of these clouds or what's out there.
Yeah.
And so we understand that we have to gain perspective to what we are doing. And perspective would change our action as well. Sometimes we live in small islands like these, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, in the Caribbean region, particularly in the small islands. And sometimes we can become locked into what we imagine that the world looks like. So in a practical sense, when you're exposed to the global picture or the global village in which we now live, we understand that there are 8 billion people or so in this world, and that there are different nationalities, different mindsets in which we live, different cultural beliefs and operations. For example, one of the things that we experienced was that the attitude toward time.
Right.
For example, in different cultures around the world, if you are working with a German in particular, and you are meeting at a particular hour, let's say 5 o'clock, they would be there by 4:30. If you're meeting with an American, they'll probably be there exactly at 5 o'clock. If you're meeting with a Caribbean, it's probably by 5:30. Just generally, if you're meeting with a South American, it's probably about 6 o'clock. So people have different values regarding time, in essence. And so we understand that, and we have a sense that we are culturally wired in particular ways. But in this global change, and particular time changes that we have, and time zones, we have to adjust. So much so that now there are trainings and Zoom trainings and Zoom meetings globally, and sometimes you have to wake up midnight. Depends on which part of the world you live in, to participate in your business, in your company, in your church organization, or 2 o'clock in the morning. So people are making all these adjustments because we cannot set a time that would please everybody at 8 a.m. in the morning. As a matter of fact, when it's 8 a.m. in Grenada, it's 8 p.m. in Singapore.
That's right.
And so we understand the time differences. That's one example of how the adjustments, and understand how that affects us all in terms of the adjustments and changes that we have to make.
Yes.
And so one of the challenges is really how do we adapt to the change in time as a leader. It calls for a radical view of what worked then and may not work now, and how do we adjust to that. Just today I was talking to some of my brothers in India, and it's a 9:30 meeting for me here in Grenada. It's a 7 p.m. meeting for them in Bangalore.
Okay.
And so the day is finished basically, and we are just starting out today. But the adjustments people are willing to make in order to accomplish goals and tasks. In the same way for us here, in wherever we are listening at this time, the readiness and willingness to adjust to the times in which we live. We still have the issue of the pandemic and not able to meet physically in physical spaces, but we have to understand that we have roles and functions in order to accomplish the goals that have been set up by our organizations.
Right. The book here, according to the ideal state, it says we must not focus on who we think we are, but on who we want to be. Is that who we want to be? Is it based on your company, or is it as a person, the type of leader that you want to be, that you must focus on? And what are the steps that you can take to be the leader that is requisite for where you are?
That's an important question, Abigail. Because the challenge is that you tend to become like the people that you associate with.
Right.
So you have to determine as an individual and as a leader in your own right, if this organization, if this company really has the same value that you have as an individual, and whether you want to associate with that company, that structure, that organization, that movement. And so when you have determined your personal values and where you want to go as an individual, and how you're going to fulfill your purpose and your mission in life, if you're being offered to work or to serve in companies and organizations that do not have those same or similar values, then it enables you to make right choices and right decisions. So you can say no to a better yes, because you have already determined in your life and in your sense of mission and purpose, this is what I want to do with my life. I do not want to do that with my life. And so you have made up your choices even before you're offered positions in government, in companies, in churches, in denominations, and you determine where you best fit. And so it's an individual challenge for all of us to fulfill God's purpose, because the perspective that we come with from this discussion is primarily our vision and purpose is located in our relationship with the sovereign God, and the God who determines and dictates. If we follow his guidance, if we follow his path, if we follow his plan and direction for life will end up in the right place.
Because I'm thinking oftentimes a leader that takes that approach may be faced with ridicule. And my mind runs to Peter in the boat when they saw Jesus walking. I'm sure, he probably discussed quickly with them, look, it's Jesus. I want to go out and meet him. And probably the others will be like, no, how you could go? I mean, a leader may be faced with, chidings or called names or, just faced with things that are difficult. So the leadership, as you said earlier on, is not for the weak in heart.
Precisely. So each of us has to really settle and hear what God intends for us, and to find that direction from Him. When we go back to references in Scripture that talks about Nehemiah,
Right.
one of the greatest leaders of all times, who spent 4 months seeking God's face
Right.
and seeking God's direction for rebuilding a city. And we may not be rebuilding an entire city, but rebuilding lives is such significant role and work during these times. Many lives are broken, like walls that have been broken down, but far greater than that, the lives of many are broken and damaged and destroyed because of fear and the economic concerns, financial letdowns and unemployment and all the crises that are affecting and impacting all of us. And so we can find our location in God Himself, who is the source, who is the sovereign ruler of this world. And so sometimes it seems as the world is falling apart and we don't know what to do. We're listening to all the news report of the strains of COVID and the panic that is gripping this world. But from the Christian and biblical perspective, we know that God is ultimately in charge of this world. And once we get linked up to Him, once we find our anchor, as it were, in Him, He gives us the hope and He gives us the peace in the midst of the storms that we all face. So leadership is not an easy role. It calls us to go back to the greatest leader of all times, Jesus Christ Himself. And He gives us the model, He gives us the mandate, He gives us the message that we all need during these times of uncertainty and change.
And once we follow Him, as you said, once we seek His direction, there will be a peace. Sooner or later, everyone will get on board, and we will see, as we would say, the glory of the Lord, or the manifestation of the purposes of God as we follow God as leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in Leadership Plus, and if you have any questions for Reverend John, please send them in on 403-1031.
Yes, so we want to remind and re-emphasize the need for all of us to fulfill God's purpose. One of the things that we don't want to do is to look back and in regret, remorse, missed out on the great plan that God intended for us. And of course, this involves listening to Him, seeking direction from Him, getting advice and counsel from wise people of faith, people who have gone through years of relationship with God. You have watched their lives, you have seen the fruit of their lives and the work that they have been involved in, whether it's in government, whether it's in business, community projects, within the church, within the neighborhood in which you live. Paul says to his readers, he says, imitate me even as I imitate Christ. So the primary goal and function of individuals within the Christian context is to imitate the work and life of the greatest leader of all times, Jesus Christ.
Okay. So, could you give us a bit of an application as to how the leader that takes things, on a radical change and decides to do things a bit differently, could you just give us another application of how that leader thinks and how he operates?
Great. So it involves the willingness to take a hard look at where we are,
Mm-hmm.
um, and the willingness to dispel some of the myths that we have believed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Sometimes we hold tightly onto traditional roles and functions within organizations, um, only because we have seen those functions happening over our lifetime, as it were.
Right.
But it takes a radical view and approach to examine them carefully, to examine whether we are making progress or whether we are retreating or whether we have been failing. And that takes honesty, it takes integrity, it takes a serious hard look at where we are and where we want to go with our individual lives, but also in a business, as company, organization, as a church leader, as a denominational leader, rather than to sit down, as it were, and where we have been and what we have been taught and with what we have believed over all these times. But we do not throw out the baby with the bath water,
Right.
as we normally would say, but we examine carefully where we are and do serious thinking and hard look. And sometimes that is not always easy. It's much easier to continue what we're
Yes.
doing as we're doing them,
Yes.
but we're told that it's only unwise people who expect to do the same thing over and over
Get different
and
results.
get different results.
Right.
So that applies to all of us at the individual level, but also at the organizational level as well.
Right.
And so these are exciting times. These
Yeah.
are days for innovation, days for creativity,
Right.
days for greater impact globally.
Mm-hmm.
Just imagine that you could be sitting in Grenada and have an impact globally because of all the platforms of streaming and communication available to all of us. So get in tune with what God is saying, get in tune with what the changes that is happening, have an awareness of where we are, and understanding the times in which we live,
Right.
like the men of Issachar,
So,
and they were able to fulfill all that God intended for them. So these are exciting, challenging times, but also days when we have opportunities that we have never had before throughout the history of mankind.
right. So what I gather from what you're saying, that leaders must be aware,
Yes.
aware of what's happening, be willing to change, and something that you touched on, there is a change that you want or what you want to be, but you must, associate yourself correctly and or associate yourself with what you want to become, so that you get to the objectives and the change that you want to see within your organization. That would be correct, yes?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
That's right. Okay.
So we have to have that sense of mission, sense of purpose,
Yes.
and in particular areas of service that you were made for, the giftedness that God has given to you as an individual. You capitalize on those giftedness, on the strengths that God has given you. You staff your weaknesses, and you complete the job that God has.
According to the text, you have fun doing the thing.
Absolutely.
Right? Yes,
So don't forget that part of it.
Yes.
Very often people see our company's organization, unfortunately even church,
Yeah.
as a place that you can't enjoy or have fun.
But serving God is so exciting.
Right.
It's so
yes.
exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we trust that throughout our journey and throughout our day, that you will actively plan to enjoy what God has so graciously given us. A beautiful isle with so many things that we take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful beaches, sunsets, flowers, friends,
Yes.
countless things
Mm-hmm.
that we often take for granted.
Yes.
So let's go out with a sense of joy in our hearts. It says, the joy of the Lord
is our strength.
is our strength.
Yes, that's right. Jesus' joy is one of the best joys you can have. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Reverend Lewis, I noticed that GIT or GIT is having a marital intelligence Zoom course.
Oh man, that is exciting.
Yes, could you highlight on that?
We always talk about the course has been the best course, but it seems as though it gets better every course that we add to the program, because we concluded a course not too long ago, and the students were wowing over it, and now this class started just Monday, and we're asking people to invite their friends to join on the Zoom call. Dr. Gil Styleblaze is talking about marital intelligence. And interesting, we talk about EI these days, emotional intelligence, and all the intelligence that we talk about. But marital intelligence is so critical. It's a starting point for those of us who are married, and those of us who would want to get married. I think is an important session. It's every Monday, and I'm sure it's on this website, I believe.
Yes, I will put all the information so our viewers and could get to it.
Right. So every Monday at 7 p.m. local time in Grenada, 7 to 9 p.m. Feel free to jump on the call. Give us a call, so at least we know who is on the call. At 420-1100, or send us an email at miagrenada@gmail.com.
All right. So that's our edition today of Leadership Plus. Reverend John, we are always happy to have you here. We always have some very informative conversation, and the listeners do share their their sentiments in that regard. So we thank you for coming again, and ladies and gentlemen, have a great morning, and see you next time on Leadership Plus with Reverend John Lewis.
Thank you very much. God bless you.